The crash itself was spectacular, but the real story begins in the seconds after Max Verstappen lost control. On the opening lap at Zandvoort, Verstappen's Red Bull struck the outside wall at the banked area Luyend Joikbocht. The car rebounded toward the circuit, and a wheel was shed as the incident suddenly became far more dangerous than a red retirement. Behind Verstappen, other drivers were approaching at speed, confronted with a wrecked car, debris, and space on the racing surface. Verstappen was unhurt, but the race could not simply continue. The incident required a stoppage, turning an early mistake into an interruption at his Grand Prix. And this is where Nico Rosberg's assessment becomes important. Rosberg described Verstappen as lucky, not because the crash was harmless, but because the consequences could have been worse. A car moving back toward traffic can create a chain reaction in an instant. One driver's accident can become several drivers' accident before anyone has time to react. So the questions are not only about why Verstappen lost control. How close was the field to a larger pileup? Why did the following drivers manage to avoid the danger? And was Verstappen's stroke of luck the crash itself, or the fact that the cars behind him escaped? That distinction matters, because the danger of a crash is determined by more than the first impact. Speed, trajectory, visibility, debris, circuit geometry, and the position of surrounding cars can transform the consequences. Within seconds, for Verstappen, the sporting outcome was severe. His race was over almost immediately. Yet the outcome was far better. He walked away, and the incident did not pull multiple cars into the same wreck. To understand why that difference mattered, we first need to reconstruct what happened at Zandvoort and where Verstappen stood before everything changed. This was not an ordinary race for Max Verstappen. Zandvoort was his home circuit, surrounded by Dutch supporters, and the 2026 event carried the added significance of being the final Dutch Grand Prix scheduled at the venue. That made Verstappen's early retirement more than a routine DNF. It removed the home favorite from the contest almost immediately. Red Bull arrived with expectations, but McLaren had established itself as a serious competitive force. Lando Norris would ultimately take victory, while Verstappen never had the opportunity to influence the race beyond its opening moments. The sequence itself was brutally simple. Verstappen approached the banked area Luyend. The Red Bull lost control, struck the outside barrier, and rebounded toward the racing surface. A wheel was lost, leaving debris and a damaged car in the path of drivers arriving behind him. With the field still tightly compressed, those drivers had little time to process what had happened, choose an escape route, and avoid the wreckage. Race control eventually stopped the event, but there is an important distinction here. The crash is an established fact. The exact degree of responsibility behind it requires more careful analysis. A dramatic outcome does not automatically establish intent, recklessness, or blame. What is clear is that Verstappen's sporting afternoon ended almost instantly, while the drivers behind him narrowly avoided turning one retirement into a much larger accident. But to understand why Rosberg called Verstappen lucky, we have to look at the circuit itself, because Zandvoort leaves very little room for mistakes. Zandvoort has always been a circuit where the relationship between speed and space matters. Its fast sections, steep banking, and relatively constrained layout create a very different risk profile from a circuit where a spinning car can simply disappear into a large runoff area at Zandvoort. Where a car goes after losing control can matter almost as much as why it lost control. That distinction becomes clearer when viewed through Formula One's safety history. Earlier generations of racing were far less forgiving. Barriers, runoff areas, car structures, medical response and race control procedures were all significantly less developed. Crashes that modern drivers can survive would once have carried much greater consequences. Formula One has therefore changed the nature of danger without eliminating it. Modern cars are engineered to absorb enormous forces. Circuits are designed to create additional space and protection. Medical systems can respond rapidly. Race control can neutralize a race within seconds. Yet one problem remains stubbornly difficult: the secondary collision. A driver may survive the first impact, but the damaged car can become an obstacle for everyone arriving behind it. That risk becomes particularly important when a car rebounds toward the racing surface. The danger is no longer concentrated on the driver who made the initial mistake. It is transferred to the entire field. Over decades, Formula One has developed layers of protection to manage precisely this problem. Yellow flags warn drivers of hazards. Double yellows demand greater caution. The safety car slows the field when an incident requires a controlled response. The virtual safety car can impose speed limits without bunching the entire field in the same way. And when the danger cannot be contained quickly enough, the red flag can stop the race altogether. These systems are supported by debris management, marshal observations, electronic warnings, and increasingly sophisticated communication between race, control, and drivers.